Here we have a group. They're not viruses and they're not bacteria. And I'm just going to cover some of the famous ones. Amoeboid protozoans. They have pseudopods. And if you look at that word, pseudo means false, pod means foot. And in the upper right, you'll see these are temporary legs. We do have them all over the world, but the ones that cause amoebic dysentery or amoebiasis occur in mostly tropical poor areas. I'm very familiar with this one. I worked 2 years in Africa, and unfortunately, I picked up some amoebiasis. The cyst divides into what's called the trophozoite, so that's one of the characteristics of this group. Migrates into the intestines. They lay eggs, and those eggs cause a lot of diarrhea and blood and mucus. And that's how I knew I had amoebiasis or dysentery. I had to use my t-shirts as diapers. I got tired of sitting on a bucket. Remember, this is in a poor part of Africa. I didn't have access to doctors, so it was pretty rough. Sporozoans, another famous group, is the one that causes malaria. The vector or the transporting agent is a mosquito. It takes a blood meal, and if you look at the diagram, it's kind of complicated, but basically the sporozoite, which is comes out of the mosquito, is going to go into the bloodstream, and then the liver is doing its job. It's going to filter the blood, but unfortunately, in this case, the sporozoite gets a new name when it enters the liver. It's called a merozoite. And here they divide and gradually destroy the liver. But they're not happy to stay in the liver because they want to be transported to other victims. And so they're going to enter into red blood cells and burst, and they cause fever and chills. And it's a terrible thing to see. I had a close friend suffer from malaria in East Africa. Fever and chills, and they alternate. So one minute he was cold, and the next minute he's burning up, 106 degrees. Finally, the gamete stage is when the organism is going to enter into another mosquito, and the cycle continues. Very dangerous, okay, but it's mostly in tropical areas because it requires certain types of mosquitoes to vector or carry it. This one I have had too, unfortunately. I picked it up in some cooked corn meal that was used. They used river water, and I didn't know that. This was in North Africa. They belong to a group called Flagellates. And if you look at the upper right, you'll see Giardia with its long tail-like locomotor structures called flagella. They may have a trophozoite stage and a cyst stage, and the cyst stage is very resistant in the case of Giardia. Causes giardiasis. And let's take a look at the life cycle here. It enters the mouth, and let me tell you, it shows up all over the world. Sometimes in local rivers, even in child care units here in California, in the U.S. It's widespread, and let me tell you, the symptoms are very unpleasant, cramping, and a lot of the stool. Well, I won't go into the stools. All right, another group that's a flagellate. Okay, these are ones with the whip-like locomotor structures. Trichomonas vaginalis. Now, this one is pretty fragile, and I guess you can get it from a toilet seat, but typically trick is sexually transmitted. And in women, it can cause sterility, so it is a reason for concern, even though the symptoms are not striking. A third group of flagellates are the Trypanosomes, and I try to sketch it out here because these, well, here the purple, you can see the Trypanosomes. They look, well, I don't know what you'd say, like twisted worms, but they have a top tail, kind of a tail fin. All right. A famous one is called Trypanosome brucei, which fortunately I did not get. I've been bitten by the Tsetse fly, but fortunately I didn't get African sleeping sickness. What happens is it's just causes mostly chronic fatigue and lowered immunity. And so sometimes people in parts of the world, they look like they're lazy and they're sitting around, but really they're suffering from Trypanosome brucei, the little flagellate. Quick review here, if this is helpful at all. I covered three main groups: the Amoeboid protozoans, which have the false foot. Think of dysentery here. The Sporozoans, we think of malaria, and that they go from different stages. You know, like we go from infant to toddler to child to adult. But we're the same person, right? Well, these ones go from Sporozoite to Merozoite and finally gamete, but it's the same organism. They just have these different life stages. Flagellates have the flagella, that's their hallmark, and we have the Giardia, which causes giardiasis. We have Trichomonas vaginalis, and finally the Trypanosomes, which can cause sleeping sickness. Now this is a huge group, and I'm just hitting some of the highlights. Thanks for listening.